Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining the Clallam EDC Coffee Chat, Coffee with Colleen. We're really excited to have Roy from Roy Street Group, Roy Mann, join us this morning. He has completed a report on behalf of the Natural Resources Innovation Center, which is a component of the EDC and part of the work we've done that was mostly funded through the the Recompete Act work that we've been pursuing. So Roy has a really interesting background, a commercial developer. He developed let's see, it was called North Lake Commons, which was 194,000 square foot facility in downtown Seattle. It was made from cross-laminated timber, which we'll talk about what is cross-laminated timber and what is mass timber. And so he did that with Dunn Lumber, if you've probably seen their commercials. And it was a partnership with, I believe, the city of Seattle. And anyway, he has a deep background in this space. And so we're really happy to have him lead this report. And he also had dialogue design, which I'll let Roy talk a little bit about who they are. They were part of the team that helped create this report. But you can find his completed report on our website, clallam.org, under resources, and it's ADU study. So with that, Roy, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Colleen, and good morning, everyone. Let me turn on my screen sharing here. And tell me when you can see everyone.
Yep, it looks great. It looks great. Thank you.
Let me see if I can minimize this. There we go. And thanks for the introduction, Colleen. Big projects and reports actually involve a broadcast of expertises and many people working hard. Certainly that was the case for this report. It was the case for North Lake Commons in Seattle and other project activity that I've worked on. I think it might be helpful to give a little bit of context for the report. The Natural Resources Innovation Cluster, this is part of a sort of bigger effort that's bringing the forestry and maritime industries really increasingly into the forefront, with a focus on workforce development and sort of kind of optimizing the industries and sort of different facets of it. The CRTC, or the Composite Recycling Technology Center, is part of that broader story, and it's really fantastic. If you haven't heard about what kind of its origins, which Colleen really played a firsthand role in bringing together, it's really fantastic, right? Taking things like carbon fibers that might have otherwise been destined for landfill and making usable, durable products with them, right? So the Composite Recycling Technology Center for the last few years has been working in close collaboration with the Makah tribe, which has a mill that they use for, well, and let me just, the image that you're seeing in front of you is actually a stand of coastal Western hemlock, right? It's it has a moisture content that typically makes it unusable for construction purposes. However, what the CRTC and now what's called the Building Innovation Center, which is their expansion space here in Port Angeles, is been doing is getting the milled wood from the macaw tribe and this taking this Western hemlock, putting it into what's called a thermal modification unit, basically kiln drying it, removing some of the moisture content enough to be able to take what's sort of typically viewed as a kind of junk wood and creating a durable uh, and, and usable construction material. So anyway, that's a really fantastic story. Now let me just step back for a minute. Mass timber, what's that? Um,
And Roy, if I can add two
sure.
things quickly about the CRTC and the macaw. The macaw tribe owns about 50,000 acres, and about 80% of their acreage is this western coastal hemlock, which has not been high value timber. And they are a resource tribe, and they rely upon to for their economy. They rely upon their timber resources and their fishing resources. So this is really critical for them as a tribe. And they have, if I recall, around 1,600 tribal members in Neah Bay, and the largest tribe in our county. And so it's, creating a higher value use for this critical resource of theirs was an absolute priority for them as a tribe. So go ahead, Roy. Thanks for letting me
No,
butt in.
yeah, no, thanks. And please chime in with any clarifications and nuances as we move ahead. So mass timber, it is also known as cross-laminated timber, or where you have panels of wood, usually three, but it could be multiple panels that are um, glued together at 90-degree angles and at different sort of depths, and that basically create a kind of a super strong construction material. So the Western hemlock is actually now part of that sort of mass timber, um, what wood and construction material um, uh, opportunity set. The mass timber industry, although it's relatively new in North America, it's been around for more than 30 years, and mostly it began in Austria and then subsequently in Denmark and Sweden and other parts of the Nordics. And I'm going to make an observation here, a prediction. Actually, it's not a prediction because I really see it already on the horizon. Um, at a meeting yesterday with Steve Tarringer, who I'm pretty sure is on our call, he mentioned taking kind of a learning trip to Denmark and Sweden in 2014, so a decade ago. In part to learn more about, okay, great, how are the Europeans doing this, right? How are they using this technology to create more jobs and to create beautiful built structures, right? That have all kinds of other virtues, and low carbon footprint and so on and so forth. My what I see is a time is coming in the not too far away future when the North Olympic Peninsula is actually going to be hosting groups from far and wide, um, showing them about what kinds of innovations are possible, right? With this construction type. Okay, now I'll move.
So
I'll zoom. I'll
Roy,
zoom. I'll zoom in.
Roy,
Go ahead.
one other thing to add to cross-laminated timber and why the environmental community really likes it is because it uses smaller diameter trees. and then allows the larger trees. And the larger trees do better when they have a bit more space and aren't crowded. So anyway, that's the big
Yes.
thing about cross-laminated timber is, and different types of mass timber, is that it's they use smaller diameter trees as the resource.
Yeah, that's right. And again, just to give credit where credit is due in terms of the folks that helped weigh in on this report, the dialogue, that's Vancouver, BC based, although they're increasingly here in Washington, are engineering and design experts with a ton of experience in the mass timber space, both actually in Europe. Members of the team have been in Europe in mass working in mass timber factories, and they've really helped lead a number of the mass timber projects in and around British Columbia and elsewhere. So um, anyway, it's an emerging part of the industry. But that said, it's what's going to be happening is it's going to be increasingly integrated in with other construction material types, including conventional stick-built construction, right? 2x4s, and you go to your local Home Depot or lumber like lumber traders and locally, and to get your materials, they're brought to the job site, and and you build a home or some or a similar type of structure, right? So this is a material type that is very much it's still new, right? Um, but what I think what we all can expect is increasingly it's going to um, grow in prominence. Hopefully that wasn't too much context setting, or what's mass timber and what's its backstory, and what's sort of on the horizon. But let me move on to a few slides. The When we first started and met with leaders of the Natural Resources Innovation Cluster, including its program director, Ted Sturtevant, Ted made an observation. He said, this report is about identifying markets, right? It includes other facets like regulatory components and financial components. And I can get into the weeds on some of those, but I'm predominantly going to focus on identifying markets, right? Because if you've got this resource, where are the areas that are where there are opportunities to be, you know, um, taking it to market, right? Okay, so here's my introduction. I think we just covered some of this, except I will say originally the what was conceived was of tiny house or accessory dwelling unit up to about 1,000 square feet. We decided to use sort of 4 different size ranges from 400 to 600, 601 to 800, 801 to 1,000, and then 1,001 to 1,200. So you'll see those 4 size categories in some of the information that I'll be sharing. Now, identifying markets. I'm going to start with an infographic. And let me explain what you're looking at here. Part of what we are recommending, or part of what we see is, or maybe I'll use Colleen's expression, concentric circles, right? The focus has been how can um, advanced cross-laminated timber and accessory dwelling units and sort of creating a product that helps address housing needs, first and foremost, um, be be introduced here into the North Olympic Peninsula. Okay. And then thereafter, sort of what are the concentric circles where really there are some strong market opportunities. Okay, so what you see then are in the black bubbles are areas within Clallam and Jefferson counties that really would be part of a first distribution phase. Thereafter, the blue is sort of a second phase, and followed by the gray, which are some of the larger markets um, on the other side of the Puget Sound. And then, okay, so anyway, I want to hit pause right there. I guess well, actually, let me just say the, in terms of sourcing the Macaw Res, we've already mentioned the mill. The Quileute Reservation has been actively interacting with members of the NRIC team, wanting to um, do workforce training and introduce new housing into their community. So I think um, anyway, that's a discussion that will be ongoing. Before I get into some market information and sort of the data behind the dots that you see here, hey, Colleen, do you want to interject with any nuances? Or I mean, I know we're parking Q&A for the last 20 minutes of our visit this morning, but
Well,
that's
typically what we do, if it's okay with you, if people have questions about a slide, just have them raise their hand
yeah.
or
No,
put
I
it
would
in
say
the chat.
I would say absolutely. And if for some reason, because I'm screen sharing, I don't see a question that pops up in the chat, and you wanna
I
just read
will.
it out,
Yep.
right?
Yep. That's what I do.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, so I would say, yeah, let me open it up to any questions or brief observations people might have, and then I'll hit the so I mean, I'll move on so that some of the sort of so we're hitting the tops of the waves in terms of takeaways from the report, including closing with some of the recommendations that were part of the report. Questions, comments?
I don't think we have anyone with questions at this
Okay.
point. I'll let you know if,
Yeah,
and you'll see
perfect.
if someone raises their hands. Okay.
Okay. So what I'm going to do then is, for a minute, I'm just going to show you two slides that are really market data orient or focused on the two largest uh, or most densely populated areas. One is Port Angeles in Clallam County, and the other is Port Townsend in Jefferson County. And so in the four size ranges, and I'm going to focus, I mean, here what you see is how many homes in these size ranges have sold, right? When was it built, or has it been built since 2019? In other words, is it newer construction? Average number of bathrooms, um, and bedrooms is the most common number. Anyway, and then you have a low and a high selling price, a median price, and sort of the average price per square foot, and then a high price per square foot. And I think for me, the final line is a really important one. The rental price. And the reason is well, I'll come back to the reason. In any case, here's what owners of property are fetching or getting in terms of monthly rental income in their respective sizes, right? So from a little more than 1,000 to 2.25 plus or minus from small to large. So that's the Port Angeles market. Now I'm going to toggle forward to Port Townsend. And as you can see, there's been more activity in terms of numbers of homes, or tiny homes, or sort of small accessory dwelling unit types of structures that have been sold in Port Townsend. And this is over, and the period that we're looking at is, well, anyway, Now stop getting it too far into the weeds. I guess again, I'm going to go back to that bottom rental price line. It's the Port Townsend market is on a monthly per square foot um, uh, basis is getting a little bit more than Port Angeles. I think the important comment is both are active, and it's not just Port Angeles and Port Townsend. Just as by way of comment or anecdotally, um, my wife had two cousins and one of their friends visit, and they rented this last weekend. They rented a tiny house in Joyce, Washington, that they for the weekend. So they're smaller sort of um, kind of ADUs and tiny house structures that that are being rented out both short term and long term, really throughout the two counties. It just happens to be that Port Townsend and Port Angeles, see the most activity. Okay, so that's a
Real
glimpse
quick,
at
Roy,
activity. Yeah,
very quickly, so go back one slide because I want to compare the median price of those 21. So here in Port Angeles, there were 56 that sold that were over 1,000 square feet, and the median price was about
yeah,
350.
that's right.
And they got
That's right.
2,200 or so, 2,266 was the rental price. So go to the next slide. So that one was
Exactly.
350. The next slide, Port Townsend. The median price for that, geez, was $175,000 more in Port Townsend than it was uh in Squim. Do you know if the quality of those were that much greater, but yet the rental price is only, it was less?
I, and if in the actual report, this particular data point is footnoted. It's a little bit of an anomaly in terms of that higher bump in median price, and the reason is it's the high prices of some of the other um, waterfront homes that did sell during this period in this size range.
Okay,
Um, they fetched a much higher number. And
got
so
it.
it shifted that median north.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sure. I think a
And
question popped up
yeah,
or a comment.
Rick asks, curious what percentage of these sized homes in these markets are rented versus owner occupied versus vacation rental?
Good question. Um, I don't know off the top of my head, but let me come. I can come back with that. I'd say what I've seen is, and I'm just going to speak to the rental part. Um, a number of owners are working out rental arrangements where during the summer months they're doing short-term rentals because the income potential is very high since lots of people want to come out and participate in the region's natural beauty. Um, and then they do, it's actually economically for a number of ADU owners to to rent short term, even if their longer term rental or off season rental period is sort of falls. What the percentage breakdown between short term versus just all full time on all the time long term, I'm not sure. And similarly, what the breakdown is between am I a renter or do I happen to own a primary residence on a single family residential sort of lot and an accessory dwelling unit that maybe is for um, an elderly member of the family or a relative or someone else that um, right that or a young adult child, right? Anyway, so I'm not sure the exact breakdown. Shall I go on?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm also mindful of our time. Okay, so I there are two different case studies. One is from Seattle, and the other one is from Port Angeles that I want to touch on. And this really is from the perspective of why are people getting into um, from the owner side of things, owner slash investor side of things, why are people increasingly interested in using portions of their residential properties for as really as a vehicle for um, like an investment tool, right? So this example in Seattle is you'll see number one here is what the original house looked like, and then what the buyer did, and this all happened within less than 12 months. They renovated the original house, and I'll show you the economics in just a moment or on the next slide. They renovated the original house. On the back half of the lot, they put an accessory dwelling unit on, and then they created, and the reason the word condo is in here, they created uh, sort of a structure where that back half of the lot could be separately owned by a new buyer of that accessory dwelling unit. And so here's the math on how that went. The original home was purchased for 720,000. The renovation cost and the selling cost was 445. The new ADU, oops, sorry, I see a typo there, was 373,000. So the all-in cost was a little more than 1.5 million. The renovated home sale was 1.2 million. Then when they sold this condoized ADU, it was 833,500. So the total uh, sales proceeds were north of 2 million, and the net gain from the investment, um, pre-tax, was almost $500,000. So the ROI, when you look at the return on investment, in this case, it was 32%. So um,
That's
so
a
the
good
owner,
return.
that's a that's a very strong return. And now what you'll see in a moment is actually an even stronger return in Clallam County in Port Angeles. And this one I
If we
don't have a
can,
picture. Or go ahead.
okay, if
You
we
want to?
can pause very quickly.
Sure, sure.
So they couldn't sell the ADU without it being a condo because they weren't allowed to divide the lot. This wasn't where an area where they could do a lot subdivision.
Yeah, like a lot
So
line investment and
yeah,
a
so
subdivision.
I think that's an important point to make. So they created a condo association so that they could sell, and some people may not be familiar with what the legal definition of a condo is. So it's where you own basically the improvements and but not the ground underneath. That's owned by the condo association. So it's a little bit complicated, but it certainly did create a good return for this person.
It did. And so I saw a question pop up. Where was this? It's in Northwest Seattle at on Third Avenue Northwest at 135th, if you're familiar with the Seattle area. So that's not far north of Olympic View, sort of Crown Hill. It's probably a 2-3 miles north of that. Not far from Carkeek Park, if to give another landmark. Okay, I want to continue on unless there's other observations or hand raises to another return on investment example of an accessory dwelling unit in Port Angeles in this case. And I don't have any pictures, but here's, and this is an instance where uh, someone bought the land, they sourced a manufactured ADU structure that was 1,200 square feet. Land was plus or minus 100,000. The structure was 90,000. And then what they did was the cost, and this is an all-in sort of cost for transporting the ADU to the site, uh, adding some skirting around the perimeter of the structure and blocking it and so on, and plus utilities cost was plus or minus $50,000. So the total cost of the investment um, was 240,000, and then this particular buyer decided to test the market. They put the new the new sort of 1,200 square foot structure and its lot on the market for sale. It sold for 375,000, and so there were again pre-tax return on investment was 56%. So I could say more about that. Here's Eric Marks, current
Yeah.
example, like the
So he
development
says
of.
it looks like a standalone single family residence rather than an ADU. And that's correct, right?
Yeah, that is correct. However, it's still in the size range that we're working with. And and on that same lot, for example, this same buyer, it was more than 7,000 square feet, which allow, and the city of Port Angeles allows for at least one other accessory dwelling unit. So this same buyer actually could have sourced yet another structure. Let's call it a 600 square foot ADU, put it on the property, and then sort of sold both primary and ADU. But no, that's a good observation. So technically, it's just a single unit or a single domicile on a single family parcel.
Mhm.
That said, the I think what the reason that I included this, I included it for two reasons. One is sometimes the perception is that there's no there's no money to be made in this space, um, or sort of making it work, making it pencil is difficult. And I would say, based on what we've learned and the feedback that we got, and the market and the actual data, the data suggests actually all kinds of potential. Um, anyway, so food for thought. I'm going to carry on. How much does some of this stuff cost? One member of the team, I mentioned a really great experts. Our cost estimator was Danny Steiger, the president and CEO of Lumber Traders and Hartnagel Building Supply. He took one of the pre-approved ADU, a 480 square foot ADU in this case, in the city of Port Angeles, and did some costing. And so for a 480 square foot accessory dwelling unit, you can look at some of the different line items, right? All in, just shy of $50 per square foot, or a little bit less than $30,000 in terms of costs to put the structure on the site, right? Um, that's not the land cost. It's not other types of things, hookups and so on. But as it relates to costs of the structure, I think this is a good example of what it would, kind of what it would take for a buyer or someone that wants to put a small tiny house or a structure or an ADU structure on an existing lot in the region.
When I first saw this, I thought, boy, those numbers seem so low. I mean, we're hearing from, like, as an example, Estes, they, in their advertising, they say they do custom homes, but they start at $400 a square foot. And we've heard that there's, the cost of supplies are so incredibly expensive. But, and I know this would be considered a starter home and, nothing, not upgrades, that kind of thing, but $50 a square foot just seemed much lower than what I had anticipated we'd find.
Yeah, it does seem lower, and just to be clear, it it's actually a fairly broad range, right? Um, the one of the like kind, and I'm going to give two ends of a spectrum, okay? One of the like kind products that's based out of British Columbia, trying to remember the name, Cabin Kit. Anyway, they basically make a panelized accessory dwelling unit that's made out of mass timber or cross-laminated timber product. Um, and there's another one in Washington in the southeastern part of the state called Teton Cabins. And basically their number per square foot is north of $600 per square foot. That's on one end of a spectrum. The example that you sent me only, I think, day before yesterday, Colleen, is the latest. Um, Amazon's gotten into this space. They have an 800 square foot structure that you for a is they're selling for $34,000, which works out to be a little more than $42 per square foot. So people, buyers, and all of us, no one, absolutely everyone is sensitive to cost. I mean, I think the common what you can expect from all of us is we want the best quality for the lowest price point, the lowest intelligent price point. Anyway, so that's so I think these numbers that you see in front of us, um, well, they're competitive for sure.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think we have a bunch of comments in the chat, and they're making really great points that this really looks like a shell only, that it doesn't include flooring, it doesn't include cabinets, plumbing, electrical, and of course the labor.
Correct. Well said. And one of the advantages, as a side note to this, is that mass timber construction has over stick built is often this is all. I mean, these pieces fit together like a Lego set, and so it shortens the construction timeline on the job site, and thus lowers the overall cost structure of of bringing the project to fruition.
Mhm.
So since I didn't see all those comments, what I'm happy to go on. In fact, I'm more interested in getting into the Q&A
Sure.
sort of
Yeah.
formally, but let me just plow forward. And in the interest of time, I'm inclined to really trend toward the recommendations, which are not far away. But since I know a number of us are engaged in workforce development, here's just a sampling of some of the different jobs that are at present and will be emerging in the mass timber or CLT career space. And this isn't an exhaustive list, FYI, it's just a sampling. Okay, now I'm going to carry on to recommendations. Since again, the origin of this report is to provide a market, kind of identifying markets for, and sort of the regulatory and financial and supply chain sort of kind of uh, issues relative to this advanced cross-laminated timber accessory dwelling unit or product really that is in the making at the um, innovation center here in Port Angeles. These recommendations are really specific to that to that and to that to that business, right? Or at least many of them are. Okay, so first of all, leading with design and engineering, that's key, right? In other words, build a product that's going to meet the many layers of sort of code approval that will be needed, right? And the next part of that, of course, is working with the different jurisdictions. And this is the second item, um, working with the different jurisdictions to get early approval of the prototypes that will be coming out of the Building Innovation Center. I think in terms of the timeline, the first prototype is slated for, I mean, they already have an example in the shop. I think they want to have a more fully sort of um, comprised prototype before the end of the year. So the second recommendation is really, right, get out there into these key jurisdictions and work on your pre-approvals. Okay, and the other ones I'm gonna over or pass over. The next phase, so it's really from 13 to 24 months and beyond, is starting now to plan for market entry, right? I've got a quote here from Randy Schillinger, who I interviewed with. He's the CEO of Hampton Lumber. They a few months ago they um, bought it. Hampton is outside of Portland, Oregon. A few months ago they bought out Red Built, which is a national mass timber sort of design and engineering firm. Visual of a prototype. I can deliver on that. Let me come. I'm going to come back to that, but let me just wrap with these, and then maybe what I'll do is put up a visual of the prototype. Um, Improving education and awareness, right? This is a newer industry, getting um, both current and up and comer, um, sort of getting people that are going to be in some of these different careers associated with mass timber. You know, starting that early and soon is going to be important. Okay, so I'm gonna here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna toggle over to the actual report. I'm gonna pull up a sample image of a prototype, and bear with me.
And I did put the link to the actual report in the chat.
Yay. Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Okay, so this, yeah, let me see if I
Oh,
can grow
we don't
my
see it.
screen.
I think
Oh,
we've got to stop sharing and then reshare.
okay. Hang tight. Getting closer. All right. So thanks for your patience, everybody. Let me show you the inside of a prototype. As soon as I tap screen share again. Okay. Tell me, folks, if or Colleen, if you can see that. Okay.
Yep, sure can.
This is a 1,200 square foot. Let's see, is that still sharing, right? I think.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. This is a 1,200 square foot mass timber or CLT prototype that there's actually so-called volumetric, or it's three container units, three 400 square foot container units that have been conjoined, and each segment of 400 square feet has a sort of different um, uh, sort of
Function.
function, right? But you get a sense for how beautiful. I mean, mass timber, like any wood product, when you have it in a home, it's stunning. Um, anyway, so there's a sample. I'm gonna just be quiet, or rather, open it up for questions and comments from the group. I hope you found this helpful. I hope that the report itself really forms the basis of more discussion and dialogue in the months ahead. Colleen, do you
So
want
Dale,
to? Yep.
yeah, Dale has put into the chat, what do you think is the actual feasibility of manufacturing modular ADUs locally? Who might be able to take the lead in actual large-scale construction efforts? Is this the CRTC?
It's a great question. It's a question I've been asking, and you'll see this in the phase two or the second phase recommendations. I think some form of partnering with the CRTC and some industry leaders or some mass timber manufacturing entities that really understand production, right?
Yeah.
And there are some strong candidates out there that have, for different kinds of reasons, to be here on the Olympic Peninsula. And so does this have a future locally? I would say absolutely.
So, and that's, yeah, something we talked about in depth, that having an entity that has experience in the manufacturing realm in this space lowers the risk dramatically. And also they would have the capital that's necessary to create a facility that would allow this kind of manufacturing.
Lowers,
And
lowers the risk, and let me just add, and importantly, helps lower the cost, which makes it which makes it something that more and more um, uh, people are going to want to participate in.
And so someone asked about, John Ralston asked, does this meet the new energy code requirements?
This one that I'm standing in does. I think that's a really, really important question, right? With any new, and to be clear, this prototype here is presently situated in Tacoma. This isn't the CRTC's prototype that's in their Building Innovation Center. Um, in any case,
Yeah, and
making sure.
Darlene asked,
Go ahead.
on ADU properties, is there a required amount of permeable ground that that must be left to avoid flooding stormwater runoff?
I think that's going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. What you will see is, what is it, Washington House Bill 1337, that's focused on ADU and more ADU development within the state to address housing. You're going to increasingly see local jurisdictions uh, adopting that in ways that are unique to their own site requirements and so on, and permeability as well. So that's I know a bit of a broad answer, not a kind of lasered in one.
Mhm.
Those are my thoughts.
So then Dale asked, who should be the lead to make this happen? Is it the EDC? So if you saw in the newspaper yesterday, there was, I met with the county commissioners, I think that was Monday, yeah, and proposed that we take some of the strategic development grant funding that has been awarded to the EDC, and instead of using it for economic analysis as was written into the contract, going back to what our original proposal was, is that part of this funding would be used for the Natural Resource Innovation Center and the work that Roy and Ted Sturdivant are doing, which part of that is about accessing their networks and their relationships in this space to pursue the possibilities of a manufacturer locally that would potentially partner with the CRTC to use their panels. But, we made it really clear to Roy and his team when he did this study to broaden it, that if he was finding it wasn't plausible to make these ADUs out of advanced CLT that the CRTC makes, what is plausible? And what is a low risk manufacturing answer that would be environmentally sustainable, and that where we could, get some pilot programs and potentially make some, both the Makah tribe and the Quileute tribe are very concerned, rightfully so, about the tsunami threats. And there's federal funding, I think, available to them to move. They need to move their housing up ground to higher ground. And so, being able to support that or support school structures, et cetera, those are all things we're looking at. And so the EDC is playing a part, certainly, but we've got to bring some expertise in, and folks that have these long relationships with these manufacturers that do this kind of work. So next, DQ says, are there tour site visits available to these units?
And that also is included in the recommendation set in that somewhat longer list for phase one, which is the first sort of 6 to 12 months. And I think the direct answer is not yet, but soon, right? I mean, short of coordinating something with CRTC and seeing what they have up in their Building Innovation Center, but I think that's still germinating, and so I think tours, like a tour of a cross-laminated timber accessory dwelling unit on a subject site, pick a geography, let's just say Port Angeles. If I have anything to do with it, it's going to be before the end of the year for certain. But today, you'd have to go farther afield.
Mm-hmm. So Dale says, all of the homes being built in the SQUIM area, except for Habitats, are larger, 500,000 plus developments. The land is being sucked up for these types of projects. Do you have suggestions about what can be done to address this part of the affordability crisis? So I would say the first thing is this report, and to show, and so if you think about who's doing those developments, it's builders. And what they do is they typically do what they know, which is build stick-built homes. And so we are, partnering with NPBA and ensuring that these spec builders are aware of this as an option. And they could buy some of these smaller units in, I think it was Idaho, where the $90,000 example came from. But, we would like to have it built locally. So I think it's an education process, and folks that may have some rental properties. One was Charlie Roberts. I think he's got 32 rentals in our county. And there's a quote in there from him that, hey, if these could go up this fast, he does a lot. Right now he's building 3 ADUs himself. I think 2 in Port Angeles, 1 in SQUIM. And, but he's doing all the labor with, a small crew, and does the work himself. But if he could, I think there's a quote about something along the lines of, if I could get the majority of this placed in a couple days, I would be all in. I'd be very interested in doing that. Anyway, Dale, I hope that kind of answers your question about that. That's part of the reason why we've done this study, is trying to address the feasibility, is educating potential investors and spec builders that this might be an option they want to consider.
What else? Any other? I'm just mindful of
Yeah,
our time. And thank you
there's,
everyone for joining us, by the way.
yeah, thank you. This, Eric Marks wrote, from your report, as Randy Schillinger, CEO of Hampton Lumber, observed, generating enough business to make it work is the hard part. The new company needs strong business development and marketing expertise to turn over the rocks. Given the vast gap in profitability between ADU development in the I-5 corridor versus Port Angeles, and the undersaturation of ADU development in the I-5 corridor, if I was one of the new companies referred to by Randy Schillinger, why would I invest my marketing dollars to pursue business in Port Angeles? Wouldn't I rather pursue business in the I-5 corridor where the economic fundamentals both makes the sale of ADU services easier and leave more money on the table for my profit?
I'd say you're right. Why not? If if the sole criteria are economics.
Well, and I think a point Roy made very well is that British Columbia is much further ahead than we are as far as ADU developments are concerned. And what Port Angeles does have is an advantage, especially for some of these companies that are creating these mass timber ADUs, is the barging capability to go directly to Vancouver, to go directly to Victoria, where they're located inland in right now in British Columbia. And they're interested in Port Angeles because of the easy access that they would have to the Seattle markets and Vancouver and Victoria. So, the transportation, especially if you're barging, is a really small component of the overall cost. Jim Hagwood says, what will the finished cost per square foot for the home you are showing on the screen, 1,200 square feet, be? Insulated panel construction is regularly used in the Northeast US.
Yeah, I'm actually, this one I'm standing in here is the Forterra prototype that was part of their Forest to Home initiative. I have a call at 10 o'clock that I'm asking that very question to their director of real estate too. So I don't know, at least not in the near term, or at least not in the moment.
I think we'll be keeping folks up to date. We could even do an update in our newsletters, I think would be a great way. If you're not, if you don't receive our weekly newsletters, Mitch Kuntz, you can put a direct chat to Mitch in the chat and he'll get you on the newsletters. But we can provide updates there. And then DQ says, is there any way to be involved? Oh, that was about the progress of these units. Okay, so, and then Mitch wrote who our next guests are. So, gosh, we're at 9 o'clock, Roy. And I think this may be a good time to wrap it up. Sure. I do recommend, Steve Theringer has a question. Representative Theringer.
Thanks, Colleen. I just wanted to put in the mix that we're Capital Budget Committee this summer is looking at school construction with cross-laminated timber, and we have a tour next week actually of some examples of where that's happened. We're looking at some economies of scale by using mass timber or CLT to develop a capital prototype or multiple capital prototypes for school construction. So not only in the housing space as Roy's working on, but also in school construction and other areas. So for the peninsula, if we develop a manufacturing base for creating the panels, there might be other opportunities instead of just ADUs on the peninsula itself.
And on the same billet, that one can put panelized sort of home components with school elements that would be used in a school structure could also be utilized. Anyway, so that's great news.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And if you have any further questions about the study, Roy's contact information is there on it. We really appreciate you joining. Thanks, everyone.